which is Genesis 44:18 through 47:27. And basically, just a few bullet points on this, is Judah, we're going to see here that Judah steps forward. We know this is the story of Joseph again. He's put them through their little test. Judah steps forward during this parashat and steps up. Joseph's going to identify himself to his brothers. Jacob hears Joseph is alive, and he goes to Egypt. And then the famine time starts. The land goes to the Pharaoh, and the brothers end up in Egypt. And then they're reunited. So we're going to look at a few things. So real quickly, let me read. I'm going to read 44:18 through 45:11. I'll read the first sentence here in Hebrew. This is Vayigash elav Yehuda vayomer bi Adoni yadaber na avdecha dovar ba'azni Adoni v'al yichar ba'avdecha ki So then Judah approached him and said, "If you please, my lord, may your servant speak a word in my lord's ear, and let not your anger flare up at your servants. For you are like Pharaoh. My lord has asked his servant, saying, 'Have you a father or a brother?' And we said to my lord, 'We have an old father and a young child of his old age. His brother is dead. He alone is left from his mother, and his father loves him.' Then you said to your servants, 'Bring him down to me, and I will set my eye on him.' We said to my lord, 'The youth cannot leave his father, for should he leave his father, he will die.' But you said to your servants, 'If your youngest brother does not come down with you, you will not see my face again.' And it was when we went up to your servant, my father, we told him my lord's words. And our father said, 'Go back and buy us some food.' We said, 'We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down. For we cannot see the man's face if our youngest brother is not with us.' Then your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One has left me, and I presumed, alas, he has surely been torn to pieces, for he has not seen him since. So should you take this one too from my presence, and disaster befall him, then you will have brought my holiness to evil and disgrace. And now if I come to your servant my father, and the youth is not with us, since his soul is bound up with his soul, it will happen that when he sees the youth is missing, he will die. And your servants who have brought down the holiness of your servant our father to sorrow in the grave. For your servant took responsibility for the youth from my father, saying, 'If I do not bring him back, then I will be sinning to my father for all time.' Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of a youth as a servant to my lord, and let the youth go up with his brothers. For how can I go to my father if the youth is not with me, lest I see the evil that will befall my father?" Before I start 45, hopefully you can identify with the change in Judah here. Benjamin got caught with his stuff that was in his sack. Joseph already said, let him be, he's going to be the one that has to pay. And we see a different Judah here who is talking to Joseph and has concern and is willing to spare and give up his own life. And so we see a different Judah here. And it goes on in 45:1, it says, "Now Joseph could not restrain himself in the presence of all those who stood before him. So he called out, 'Remove everyone from before me.' Thus no one remained with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He cried in a loud voice. Egypt heard, and Pharaoh's household heard. And Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?' But his brothers could not answer him because they were left disconcerted before him. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come close to me, if you please.' And they came close. And he said, 'I am Joseph, your brother. It is me, whom you sold into Egypt. And now be not distressed, nor reproach yourselves for having sold me here. For it was to be a provider that God sent me ahead of you. For this has been 2 of the hungry years in the midst of the land, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. Thus God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival in the land and sustain you for a momentaneous deliverance. And now, it is not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me father to Pharaoh, master of the entire household, and ruler throughout the entire land of Egypt. Hurry, go up from my father and say to him, so says your son Joseph, God has made me master of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You will reside in the land of Goshen, and you will be near to me, you, your sons and your grandchildren, your flock and your cattle, and all that is yours. And I will provide for you there. For there will be 5 more years of famine, so do not become destitute, you, your household, and all that is yours. And I'll stop there. So we see here Joseph, his reunification with the brothers. The half-Torah portion for this is Ezekiel 37. I don't usually get to the half-Torah portion, but I wanted to bring it up because it's very interesting. And it's very exciting because it's very prophetic. The half-Torah portion is Ezekiel 37, verses 15 through 28. And it says, the word of Hashem came to me, saying, now you, son of man, take yourself 1 wooden tablet and write upon it for Judah and the children of Israel, his comrades. And take another wooden tablet and write upon it for Joseph, the wooden tablet of Ephraim, and all the children of Israel, his comrades. And bring close to yourself one to the other, like a single wooden tablet, and they shall become one in your hand. Now when the children of Israel, the children of your people say to you, will you not tell us what these are to you? Speak to them. Thus says my Lord Adonai Elohim, behold, I take the wooden tablet of Joseph, which is in Ephraim's hand, and out of the tribes of Israel, his comrades, and shall place them together with the wooden tablet of Judah, and I will make them 1 wooden tablet, and they shall become one in my hand. And the wooden tablets upon which you will write shall be in your hand in their sight. Then speak to them, thus says my Lord Adonai Elohim, behold, I take the children of Israel from among the nations from which they went, and I shall gather them from around, and I shall bring them to their soil. I shall make them into a single nation in the land upon Israel's hills, and a single king shall be for them as a king. And they shall no longer be 2 nations, no longer divided into 2 kingdoms again. They will no longer be contaminated with their idols and their abhorrent things and all their rebellious sins. And I shall save them from all their habitations in which they sinned, and I shall purify them, and they shall be for a people unto me, and I shall be for a God unto them. My servant David will be king over them, and there will be a single shepherd for all of them. They will go in ordinances, and they will observe my decrees and perform them. They will dwell in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, with which your forefathers dwell, and they shall dwell upon it. They, their children's children forever, and my servant David will be prince for them forever. I'll stop there. This is a beautiful prophecy. I know there's different interpretations of it. People argue over it. Who is Ephraim and all that. I don't really get into all that. I just know that God at some point is going to do something. He is doing something very beautiful. He's bringing his people back together. Amen. Who is who and who is what and all of that. To me, God will work that out. There'll probably be some pretty big surprises all over the board for everybody. But the thing is, God is into reuniting. We see here Joseph is reunited with his brothers. Joseph being, obviously his son being Ephraim. We know the kingdom was later split, and that was never God's plan. And we see here in Ezekiel 37, he's bringing his people back together. What's interesting to me is this Prince of David. Is it the physical David? For me, my personal opinion is talking about the Mashiach. It's always when we talk about the line of David, is that the Messiah is what's going to bring them together. Right. Messiah will bring the people together. Messiah will bring all things back together. And so our hope, that's why we cannot back off on the Messiah. Our goal is not just to know Torah. Our goal shouldn't be just to know our Hebrewic roots or to jump into Judaism, but our goal should be to know the Messiah. And yes, he embraces things, he was from that, things, and do all that, but that is what unites, that's what puts people together, that's what does it. We see in Ephesians, I'm going to go to the book of Ephesians now. Chapter 2. see this also. It says in verse 11, "Therefore remember your former state, you Gentiles by birth, called the uncircumcised by those who merely because of an operation of their flesh are called the circumcised, at that time had no Messiah. You were estranged from the national life of Israel. You were foreigners to the covenants embodying God's promise. You were in the world without hope and without God." So there's a separation there. At the time, he's the God of Israel. He's dealing with them. He's doing all of that. The nations, there's no covenants made with anybody else. But it says, "But now you were once far off, have been brought near through the shedding of the Messiah's blood. For he himself is our shalom, our peace. He has made us both one and broken down the middle partition which divided us by destroying in his own body the enmity occasioned by the Torah, which its command set forth in the form of ordinances. He did this in order to create union with himself from the two groups, a single new humanity, and thus make shalom. And in order to reconcile both God in a single body by being executed on a stake as a criminal, and thus himself killing the enemy. And when he came, he announced this good news, shalom, to you far off, and shalom to those nearby. News that through him we both have access in one spirit to the Father. So then you are no longer foreigners and strangers. On the contrary, you are fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's family. You have been built on the foundation of the missionaries and the prophets, with the cornerstone being Yeshua the Messiah himself. In union with him, the whole building is being held together, and it is growing into a holy temple in union with the Lord. Yet in union with him, you yourselves are being built together to a spiritual dwelling place for God." Now there's a lot to unpack there, which we're not going to do. But the ultimate theme of it is that God is into bringing people together. He had a plan. He's with Joseph, comes back. It leads to later prophetically that all of Israel would join back together in the physical sense. And even further than that, all of Israel, which includes strangers, always has, include the mixed multitude, include those who would also be joined. How that works out, the details of it, people can argue and write books about that. I just know that God is in the business of restoring people and building people together, and it's through the Messiah where he does that. And so this is our unit. This is where we come together. And I want to bring this up because as we look at this part, there's some things that we can learn from this. How we deal with different things in this whole parashah. So I want to bring up those few scriptures. In 45:1, a few commentary on this. It says, "Now Joseph could not restrain himself in the presence of all who stood before him, so he called out, 'Remove everyone from before me.' Thus no one remained with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers." I want to read the note here because there's a couple different ways you can take this. But it says, "Now Joseph could not restrain himself." The verse associates the presence of Joseph's attendants with his inability to restrain himself. Here's one of the explanations. He was ready to reveal himself, but he could not bear to let his brothers be embarrassed in the presence of so many bystanders. Or he was concerned with his own image, not that of his brothers. It could have been unseemly for him to break into tears in the presence of so many outsiders. Or Joseph's multitude of attendants were moved by Judah's plea, and they joined in pleading for Benjamin's freedom. Joseph could not resist their combined pleas. I choose to go with number one. I think there's, obviously there's different opinions on things. But it's interesting that Joseph, he could have made a show of his brothers. He could have put them down. He could have got them back. But he doesn't. I believe he removed them simply not to because now they're going to talk about what happened. Now the truth is going to come out. They're going to reveal it. You never see him telling what happened. It's very interesting. The whole path of forgiveness that Joseph takes is amazing. And the way he treats his brother, he does it. So if you go with this, it's like being right is wrong if it requires embarrassing someone else. And the Torah tells us there's different parts when we get to Vayigash where it says don't embarrass someone. Yeah. Don't bring them out. A lot of times we want to tell a story about someone and we want to do it, or we bring someone up and it's to embarrass them. I think it's very clear. We have to be careful when we bring up people's past, maybe. Okay? Maybe we don't even intend to do it, but if we bring something up, it's going to be embarrassing to them. It's not something that we take it. Try not to embarrass each other. A lot of times we want to tell people, or we want to, or if someone has a need, this is one sometimes, when someone has a need, there are legitimate times where we need to announce someone has a need, we need to take care of it. But there are also times where we just say there's a need. We don't need to bring the person up front and embarrass them and tell them that they're going through a situation that could be that. There's no need for that. Hopefully the trust could be just, there is a need, and we need to take care of it. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I think we learn from the Torah here, from Joseph, or sometimes we just need to know who's in our presence, and if we're going to talk about something, maybe put it aside so we don't embarrass the person that's doing it. The other thing in verses 4 through 8, it says, Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me, if you please." And they came close, and he said, "I am Joseph, your brother. It is me whom you sold into Egypt." This is, to me, so interesting because we talked about it a little bit last week. I think it's going to be the same thing. Yeshua is hidden now. He's known as Jesus, and he doesn't look like you think he would look. Okay, he's made mostly into a Northern European, looking person, and so you can see why he'd be mistaken. But he's affected the whole world, and it's part of God's plan. Okay, that'd be hidden. One day he will reveal himself, and he's going to reveal himself. We see this in the book of Zechariah. He's going to show his own people his scarred hands. He's going to show it, and it's going to be like this reunion here. Like I can see it should be close. Like it is me. Yes. They've been calling me Jesus. They've been doing this. They've been doing that. It is me. Yep. And their eyes are going to be open, and it's going to be a great thing when they're ready for it. I think here, what I was writing down was I think the brothers anticipated retaliation, maybe. It's very interesting here. You have, if you look at brothers throughout the history, you had Cain and Abel. Okay? That was never really resolved. You have Isaac and Ishmael. Still going on. Jacob and Esau. We see here that Joseph breaks the cycle of brothers with forgiveness. Him being a type of Messiah is so powerful. How do we break the cycle in our life of unforgiveness? How do we break the cycle in life of all the things that are bad and all that? It's through the Messiah. The Messiah breaks the cycles. And we see this with Joseph because he doesn't take the same path as all those before him with the issues with the brothers. It's total forgiveness. He's not going to continue to battle with them. He's not going to continue to do that. He's doing their best. He's not even embarrassing them. He's not bringing it up. In fact, he's doing them a favor. He's lifting them up. So he breaks that title. He's a total Messiah in this, that he just forgets it all. There's no retaliation. How? He explains it himself. He says, and now, he says, "I am Joseph's brother, the one whom you sold into Egypt." Not dismissing what they did, but he says, "But now be not distressed, nor reproach yourselves for having sold me here, for it was to be a provider that God sent me ahead of you." And he goes on telling about it. And then in verse 9, "And it was not you who sent me here, but God." I mean, what a change. What a thing to say, you know what, yeah, you physically sent me here, but you had no idea what you're doing. God's actually in control. He was able to forgive. How? He understood God's plan, that God is good. Since he was able to see the greater good of the hand of God behind the malice of his brothers, Joseph was able to forgive them for their sins against him. And this is one of the lessons. How do we forgive people? How do we move on? How do we do things? We have to see that God has a plan. God's in control. And sometimes, like we talked about last week, people are just people. They're just part of the equation. But it's ultimately God is in control. God is able to help us through anything and help us to do this. It's amazing what Joseph does here. And the notes say here in the Humash, it says, "When Joseph said, 'I am Joseph,' God's master plan became clear to the brothers. They had no more questions. Everything that happened for the last 22 years fell into perspective. So too will it be in the time to come when God will reveal himself and announce, I am Adonai. The veil will be lifted from our eyes and we'll comprehend everything that transpired throughout history.
May it happen soon.
And I think this is in Romans, I didn't bring up the scripture, but he talks about if they're rejecting, it's in Romans, if they're rejecting, Israel's rejecting Messiah brings us reconciliation with him. Imagine what they're embracing him will be. It'll be resurrection from the dead. This will be resurrection. And then in God's plan, the whole world's going to say, when it gets all done, all of our fighting, all of our disputing, all of our thoughts, all of that, we're just going to be like in awe. So to say, when Messiah comes back, all of our questions are going to be answered. Everything's going to be like, going to be, oh, duh, that was it, you know? How dumb was I to think that, you know, this and this and this. And it's going to be an amazing thing. And it's going to be revealed to us. But now we try to figure everything out and try to do all of that. We need to just focus on following God. And so go back to the basics. How do I serve you? How do I follow you? What can I do to serve you? And just trust that he's working his plans out there. He's doing everything around the world. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Let us just be ready, because then everything will be revealed and we'll understand. So hopefully that makes sense. But in verse 16, we go on a little bit farther here. It says, this news, I stopped reading verse 11, so I'll read verse 12 now. Behold, your eyes see, as do the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that is my mouth that is speaking to you. Therefore tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and all that you saw, but you must hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. He then kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. Afterwards his brothers conversed with him. I mean, what an amazing reunion. After all that had been done, all that had been said, all of this, they're worried about it. We'll see them still continue to worry about it. But Joseph just totally I'm going to embarrass you. Let's move on. God's in control. God's at complete forgiveness here. He's excited. They converse. And then it says in verse 16, the news was heard in Pharaoh's palace saying, Joseph's brothers have come. And it was pleasing in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servant. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load up your animals and go directly to the land of Canaan. Bring your father and your household and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. Now, this is just my opinion, but it seems to me that Joseph didn't talk bad about his brothers. I mean, Pharaoh's like, wow, your brothers are here, great news, go get them and bring them back. To me, in my opinion, if Joseph would have told him what rotten people his brothers were, and how they were traitors, and they traded him and sold him, well, I don't think the Pharaoh would be too excited to bring him on down. Pharaoh might have just went and thrown him in jail himself. But it doesn't seem to me that he spoke evil of his brothers. A lot of times we have to be careful. We'll talk about people, we say things about people, we give our things on people, and then when people come, let's say someone comes through these doors and we've been speaking bad of them, they don't have a chance. Our image is already formed. I might know of my brother struggling through and all of that, but I need to not tell everybody. So he can come and have fellowship. Yes, there's safety issues, and we understand that. There are times where things have to be done, but those things. But in general, it seems that he did not share those things with his thing. We can learn a lot about that. Talking bad, we can make it up, but people will still remember. I'll give you an example. See, if he would have told Pharaoh what rotten brothers he had from the beginning, like, my brothers are rotten, if they come, this and that, I think there would have been a whole different attitude. Even if he forgave them. This is why we have to be careful as men or as women if we talk about our spouses in the negative. Or if we talk about our brother or sister in the Lord in negative. What happens is we tell people this person did wrong, or my wife does this and this and this and this. We make up, okay, and we're good now. But the people that heard it don't know that we made up. They still have that in their head. Does that make sense? They're still thinking bad. Yeah, I could say I have this, I don't like this brother, he's done this, this, and this, and this, now we've made up, we're good. But people out there still think there's a conflict, they still think bad. We have to be very careful with that. It's the same thing in even congregational disputes. Sometimes we have little disputes, we fix them, and it's good between brothers, but everybody else on the outside hears about it. Oh, that's terrible there, they got this and that, and disputing over that. So we have to be careful talking about those things and doing those things, if that makes sense. We go down to verse, go down to verse 21. The sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons by Pharaoh's word, and he gave them provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave changes of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. Obviously, they're over their jealousy. Remember, Joseph had the extra coat, and they were upset. Obviously, they're giving Benjamin all this stuff, and there's no jealousy on there. And to his father he sent the following: 10 he-donkeys laden with the best of Egypt, and 10 she-donkeys laden with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey, and sent off his brothers. And they went, and he said to them, do not become agitated on the way. We're going to come back to that verse. They went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father, and they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, also that he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. But his heart rejected it, for he could not believe it. However, when they related to him all the words that Joseph had spoken to him, and they saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, then the spirit of the father Jacob was revived. And Israel said, how great, my son Joseph still lives! I shall go and see him before I die. I want to go to Luke. It says, but his heart rejected it, for he could not believe it. However, when they related to him all the words, then he started to see. We have a similar instance in the book of Luke. In Luke chapter 24, I think it's an interesting story here. This is after his death. And resurrection, it says in verse, I'll start in verse 13. It says, that same day, 2 of them were going towards a village about 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were talking with each other about all the things that had happened. As they talked and discussed, Yeshua himself came up and walked among them, but something kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you talking about with each other as you walk along? They stopped short, their faces downcast, and one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, are you the only person staying in Jerusalem that doesn't know the things that have been going on in the last few days? What things? He asked them. They said to him, the things about Yeshua from Nazareth. He was a prophet and proved it by the things he did and said before God and all the people. Our head Kohanim and our leaders handed him over so he could be sentenced to death and executed as a stake as a criminal. And we had hoped that he would be the one who to liberate Israel. Besides all that, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. And this morning some of the women astounded us. They were at the tomb early and couldn't find his body, so they came back. But they also reported they had seen a vision of angels who say he's alive. Some of our friends went to the tomb and found it exactly as the women had said, but they didn't see him. He said to them, foolish people, so unwilling to put your trust in everything the prophet spoke. Didn't the Messiah have to die like this before entering his glory? Then starting with Moshe and all of the prophets, he explained to them the things that can be found throughout the Tanakh concerning himself. They approached the village where they were going. He made as if he were going on farther, but they held him back, saying, stay with us, for it's almost evening and it's getting dark. So he went in to stay with them. As he was reclining with them at the table, he took the matzah, made the barucha, broke it, and handed it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he became invisible to them. They said to each other, didn't our hearts burn inside of us as he spoke on the road, opening up to the Tanakh to us? And it goes on from there. When I read that story of Joseph, I think of that story of Luke, how when Joseph was like, or Jacob was like, your story can't be right, he's dead, he's done. And they started to relate to him some of the stuff. And if you get the oral writings, there were certain things that they would mention that only they would know, And then his heart, it says it was revived, and he knew, my son Joseph is alive. He's revived, he's basically resurrected, and he has a new hope. And we see this in Luke too. We see these guys discouraged, sort of, like, don't you know what's going on? We have all of our hope in this guy. And he died. And some people are saying the grave's dead, but then this and that. And can you imagine just walking on the street with the Messiah, and he's explaining the Tanakh to him in the Torah? And, and just enlightening them. And finally it clicked on them, and they had what? Hope. They had excitement again. They were revived again. And so you see this story, I think, parallel with the Torah here. That's how it is. And that's how we should be when we encounter Messiah. When we become, it can just seem like there's hope. There's nothing left. It's gone. Things in the past. It'll never come back to life. It's over. It's done. But through Messiah, through these stories, he can revive things that seem dead sometimes. He can revive the parts of our lives that were put over here. He can do all of that. And he says here, going back to this one verse here, he says, do not become agitated on the way. Do not become agitated on the way. This, I want to read what the Hamash says, because it's very interesting. There's a couple different interpretations of this passage, but the first one is, do not become involved in halakhic discussion, lest the road become angry at you. Now, halakhic discussion means the way that you live things out, okay? The way that you do things. Halakha means to walk, okay? We say, what is our halakha? It's the way we do things. So, lest the road become angry at you, a figurative expression, meaning lest you become so engrossed that you lose your way. B, do not become impatient on the journey lest you travel too quickly or travel into the night before stopping to rest. That's pretty literal. C, according to the plain sense of this passage, however, Joseph feared that the brothers would quarrel with each other and engage in mutual reclamation over who was responsible for selling him. He cautioned them, therefore, not to quarrel on the road. Okay? So that makes sense. You're all going to start blaming each other. Okay? You're going to start fighting on the way, even though I've forgiven and we can do that. But I want to go back to this one. It says, do not become involved in halakhic discussion lest the road become angry at you. In figurative expression, meaning lest you become so engrossed that you lose your way. Do not become agitated on the way. We have a few scriptures. We're not going to be able to do it because of time. Romans 14. I can't even go there, but I'm going to read one verse from there. Contextually, we can't do it. But we like to major on the minors, okay? Not salvational issues. What I'm saying here, do not become agitated. This is one of the problems that we have, I think, in our world, and I have to speak. And I ain't speaking about the church, I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking to us who we call ourselves Messianic, Hebrew roots, Zion, whatever we want to call ourselves, it don't matter. We become agitated with each other, and we fight each other over little halakhic issues sometimes. It gets crazy. It gets insane sometimes. And we fight with our brothers, who say are our brothers, over things that really, in the long thing, are minor things. And we have a couple warnings. If I could just read a few scriptures. I know I'm sorry about the time. In Romans chapter 14, Romans 14 would take a whole hour to dwell in itself. But I want to read one verse from it here. We'd have to really dwell into this, but it says, now as for a person whose trust is weak, welcome him, but not to get into arguments over opinions. Okay? Will be number one. If we go down a little bit further, it says, verse 11, therefore let's stop passing judgment on each other. Instead, make this one judgment not to put a stumbling block or a snare in your brother's way. And in verse 19, so then let us pursue the things that make for shalom and mutual upbuilding. Okay? So I'm taking some liberty here with the context, so we have to go, but let us pursue the things that make for shalom and mutual upbuilding. We need to look for things. Obviously, there's things that we should take a stand on and fight over. Yeshua's the Messiah, right? His divinity. Those are things that we can't back down on. Those are things that we will not back down on. Those are things that we would take a stand. There's things that are obvious in Scripture. But then there's other things that we just have to encourage each other and build. We have differences on different things sometimes, different days, maybe different ways of the new moon, maybe different ways of pronouncing things, maybe different ways of worship. Why fight over those things? Why not encourage each other in those things? Why not encourage? Why not understand each other? Why not do those things and be in unity to come together? And that's what it is. Let's look at a few scriptures here. We'll close up with this. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14. Keep reminding people of this and charge them solemnly before the Lord not to engage in word battles. They accomplish nothing useful and are a catastrophe for the hearers. Do you know, I'm just going to say it the way I see it. We have lost more people probably in our community who we are because of our word battles, our battles with each other. The outsiders hear it and think we're crazy. I hear this when I talk to people. They think sometimes we're crazy because all you guys do is fight. You fight. You fight over little things. You fight over this. You fight over that. And we're not serving, we're fighting, and it becomes word battles. And we have to be careful because it says here, they're useless and they become a catastrophe for the hearers. People hear this, I can't believe you guys are arguing over a round earth, flat earth. You're arguing over a word. You're arguing over a day. Or with it. Does that make sense? You argue over some of the craziest things, and then people look at it and say, I don't really want nothing to do with that. Our message needs to be spot on about the Messiah and his life-changing effect upon us, and his Torah and how we live it. In verse 23, he goes on. He says, but stay away from stupid and ignorant controversies. You know that they lead to fights. And a slave of the Lord shouldn't fight. On the contrary, he should be kind to everyone, a good teacher, not resentful when mistreated. Also, he should be gentle as he corrects his opponents. But it says here, stay away from stupid and ignorant controversies. You know that they lead to fights. I've been guilty of this. Sometimes we want to make a point. We want to show people this is the way I believe it, this is the way I want to do it. I'm going to pick a fight with someone because I know they have a little bit different belief. And so we pick a fight. We do that. We're supposed to stay away from that. If I know that someone is on a little different calendar or someone is doing that, why pick a fight with them? Why not just be glad that they're serving the Lord and have a reasonable answer when they ask me why I do it on this day and give them an honest answer? But not pick a fight. And encourage them to walk in the Lord and be there. Because honestly, if we evaluate ourselves, if I evaluate myself, there are a lot of things I believe now that 10 years ago I might have a different opinion on. And I thought about it, and I heard something different, I studied different, I learned different, and I changed. So avoid those controversies that just do things, especially on Shabbat, but all the time. In Philippians chapter 2, verses 14. It says, do everything without coveting, which is grumbling or arguing, so that you may be blameless and pure children of God, without defect in the midst of a twisted and perverted generation, among whom you shine like stars in the sky, as you hold on to the word of life. If you do this, I will be able to boast when the day of Messiah comes that I did not toil for nothing. But do everything without grumbling or arguing. Titus 3:9. But avoid stupid controversies, genealogies, quarrels and fights about the Torah because they are worthless and futile. Oh, now there is a saying, any argument for the sake of heaven is a good argument. Yes, we should be debating in Torah sometimes, discussing Torah. It's not saying that we can't have disagreements, we can't be talking about Torah or trying to. That's what we should be doing. But let me read this again. Avoid stupid controversies, genealogies, quarrels, and fights about the Torah because they are worthless and futile. But if we honestly evaluate, there are things, sometimes we get into things in the Torah that we fight over and argue over and divide over that are just ridiculous. We look back at it. And so there's a warning there not to get into it. And people will want to engage and do all of that. I hope that we could be different and want to. I'll give you some examples. We can divide over ways we wear a tzitzit. Different people have different opinions. How you wear your tzitzit, what color your tzitzits are. It's crazy to fight over those things. Find out the way that you do and wear them. I'm not going to tell I have opinions, okay? And I stick by them and I have my reasons. But to tear each other down over those things, and people are watching it, and then people will be like, well, I ain't going to wear those things because y'all fight over it. I don't know if this guy's right, that guy's right, or that guy's right. It really doesn't matter. Quit fighting over those kind of things. We fight over music. We fight over liturgy sometimes. We fight over the name. Who is Jewish? Who is Israel? Holiday calendars, men and women doing things like food. The minor things. I'm not talking about clean and unclean food. I'm talking about fights in the spectrum of clean food. I want to tear people down on those things. Of course, we are to be defenders of the faith. We don't argue, but we listen to each other. In Proverbs 26:17, it says, interfering in someone else's argument is foolish. How do we answer to those who want to argue? We don't have time to look at, we're going to stop here. But you can look at Proverbs 15:1, Proverbs 15:18, Proverbs 19:11, and Romans 14:19. Basically, it is just not to argue. Just cut it off. Give a gentle answer. Just don't argue back. That creates shalom, that creates peace. There are people who want to do battle, and we have a different job to do, and it's serving Messiah and shaping people's lives. In chapter 46, in verse 4, it's interesting that he says, I shall descend with you to Egypt. I want you to recognize this, that Hashem said, this is interesting, I shall descend with you to Egypt. God says, you're going to go down to Egypt, but I'm going to go with you. This is quite amazing. He ain't just stuck to the land. He just ain't, he says, I'm going to go with you. If we can understand that the Lord, wherever we may go, even in our times of going down, that the Lord is still going with us. He goes wherever we are. Very important. In verse 8, I want to bring out something. It says, now, these are the children of Israel. I'm sorry. It talks about the 70 sons. We all get that. But there's one important thing. I'll close on this. That the prayer in verse 8, I want you to think about this later. It says, Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many of the days of your lives? And then verse 10, then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and left Pharaoh's presence. You can read 1 Timothy 2:2 later, but we have to pray for the leaders. It's interesting, guys. I thought, why would Jacob bless this pagan, this Egyptian Pharaoh? That seems crazy. And we don't have time to discuss that. I had some more notes on that, but it's an interesting thing to think about. But in Ephesians, or 1 Timothy 2:2, it tells us, whoever our leaders are, we are to pray for them. It don't matter if they're good, evil, bad. We are to pray for them and pray for them that we might have shalom, that we might have peace. And if you look at it, it's some of the most wicked people that God has used to benefit Israel. He uses them. He uses them. So we just pray for that. And lastly, one thing note that's very important, because in verse 22 of the last chapter 47, it says, only the land of the priest he did not buy. There's something set up here in Torah for later, And this goes to this whole thing about, I don't have time to talk about this, but being things, but what was established first. But it says, Joseph prophetically established a precedent that would later benefit Israel while I was in Egypt. By giving a privileged status to the clergy, Joseph established a precedent that made it possible for the tribe of Levi, the Jewish clerics, to be exempt from the servitude to which the Egyptians later subjected them to the other tribes, so that there would be a strong nucleus of people who kept alive the teachings of the patriarchs. This is interesting, because I always wondered how Aaron could just walk around. Everybody else is being enslaved, get back to work, and Aaron's just, why were they? Joseph set it up before there was even a priesthood in Israel, that the priest would not have to give up their land, but they were exempt. So later, when the priesthood comes about, this is why they could walk around their servitude, because even the Hebrew priest from the tribe of Levi, they would be able to walk around and do things. He sets it all up beforehand. And this is an important thing for us to understand. Sometimes it's not who did it first, but it's what is God doing. And so I'll close there. All right, I'm going to have Ralph's going to come on up and do the kiss. So each week we're going to do something different now. Two things we're doing different.